God and human suffering. Wow. This lesson really digs deep in its effort to find any answer of the difficult notion that human suffering only proves the non-logical existence of a good God. I hope you find some good answers.
Well, the title kind of creates the expectation that we will spend most of the time digging into the issue, but it seems that it primarily tries to create context and to paint the picture around it rather than to bring direct answers. The focal point of the lesson is on the term theodicy, which is mentioned near the end of the lesson. Theodicy is a theological term. It's a branch of theology that deals with the issue: how can a good and all-powerful God and all this suffering around us coexist? Shouldn't one exclude the other? Let's go through the items that the author brings in developing the lesson, the subject.
Does God really exist? And I know that you have already asked yourself this question at some point in the past. But do you want to know what is the straightforward answer from the Bible? Romans 1:20. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. So how come some people can't see God when looking at the same nature as we do?
So yeah, we are faced with a challenge against God's existence. According to the Bible, there is enough evidence about this in the creation. And by saying that people are without excuse, it technically points that it's more an item of choice than a matter of proof.
Two main theories are presented before us today. First, everything came to existence by itself, from nothing, and this nothing created itself. Second, everything was created, and what was created by something before it, and this nothing that was at the beginning came to existence by God. What is interesting today is that they're fervent defenders of both theories. Which side are you on? And how do you defend your position?
I remember a few years ago, there was certain buzz around some scientific discoveries that for some were kind of pointing to the idea that we don't need God in order to explain the universe. I was watching this interview on CNN with a scientist named Lawrence Krauss, who wrote a book, Universe from Nothing, and he was invited to explain it. It was interesting to hear him say how there is no proof, but that some discoveries seems to make it plausible that the forces of nature can create everything from nothing, and that this is worth celebrating. One of these discoveries is that the total energy of the universe may be zero, which is an interesting idea and may mean many things, but what got stuck with me was that he wanted to celebrate the plausibility for God to not exist. He said, I can't say with absolute certainty that there is no God, but what I would say is that I much prefer to live in a world without one. And this brings back the question about choice.
But let's come back to the book of Job. Very interesting book. It does not mention and it does not speak anything about Israel's history or Israel's culture, does not mention anything about the well-known patriarchs from the Old Testament. However, it's completely absorbed by, it's synced into, and it's immersed in the immeasurable suffering of one human being. A topic that has the full and only focus of the book. Definitely this book should be meaningful and needed if God allowed it to be part of the selection of books in the Bible. And definitely it speaks about God's concern in revealing us the origin and the mystery of all suffering.
Listen from Job chapter 6. The arrows of the Almighty are in me. My spirit drinks in their poison. God's terrors are marshaled against me. And below, oh, that I might have my request, that God would grant what I hope for, that God who would be willing to crush me, to let loose his hand and to cut off my life. Suffering can become unbearable.
If there is some permanent damage that suffering can cause, it's a great deal of confusion. We are puzzled when we suffer. Body pain or discomfort can be overcome, can be suppressed. But the cause of suffering, the reason why am I suffering, can block my mind. Sometimes we can't comprehend this big contradiction, the existence of our good God side by side with Him, allowing this tremendous pain and suffering and brokenness that we experience. In those moments, we can't stop ourselves but questioning God. And it's simply human.
Job chapter 10. Your hands shaped me and made me. Will you now turn and destroy me? Remember that you molded me like clay. Will you now turn me into dust again? It's a big struggle. When hurting, things that you understand and know are powerless to lift you up. What can provide meaning and support in the darkest moment is a relationship with the God who is involved and caring. This includes sometimes questioning and arguing as well, but it's important to understand the big picture and context.
The Bible would not give me clear answers to all my sufferings. What the Bible does is gives encouragement of trust in the goodness of God when we face evil. Everything remains grounded in the promise that one day God will be justified by our words and our judgment. After all, this is the conflict that started a long time ago. Can God be justified by His ruling and governing?
This lesson was about the controversy, God and human suffering. It continued expanding the context of what is involved and suggested that it's not so much a rational problem, but much deeper moral, relational crisis. Rupture of trust, loyalty, and a real war. It's interesting that the lesson ends with an appeal for praise, even in time of trials. But the next lesson is about cursing.
Join us next week when we will continue with the lesson Curse the Day.